Today's webinar is to discuss the lawsuits that are taking place throughout the United States concerning buyer brokers and listing brokers' commissions. In this context, it is customary to distribute the sales commission in the traditional manner, with the listing broker typically being responsible for this task. This has been the established standard in the market for many years. When you also place the ready unit in the LMLS system, you are usually specifically asked how much you are going to share with what is called the buyer broker or the cooperative broker, which is the corporation. What is the split? How much percent each one gets? This particular argument has been the subject of intense and ongoing debate in the vicinity of the year 2020. In that specific location, we are specifically discussing the issue of homes, retail homes, or residential family homes. These types of properties are the main focus of our conversation. The segment referred to as retail, which is not commercial. The retail market for single-family homes or condominiums has never been a market where large capital has ever invested. Never, ever. They had invested very little in any case in mortgages of large groups, but they were financial investments. That changed. Now we have, let's put it this way, Wall Street money invested in single-family homes and some condos. So I think this is part of the reasons why this is changing, and these demands are nothing more than that. Let's make a summary. The purpose of this webinar is to give a clear, concise, and simple summary of what is being discussed and what the possible implications are, as well as some possible alternatives to protect myself in the future. This doesn't have to be immediate, probably in the next few months and years. Well, these are all the demands that are everywhere. One, if you start reviewing, well, you have verdicts of 1.8 billion. Those are not small figures. You have verdicts of 70 million against some brokers, 55 against others. If you have essentially been receiving commissions for selling or for bringing a customer to make a purchase, these claims can have an impact on what are commonly referred to as your rights and can affect the rights that you have. There are demands everywhere in all the newspapers. If you look for them, you'll see that they're increasing more and more. I'll go straight to the point, basically, in summary. From 2020 to 2024, there have been numerous class action lawsuits emerging. At first, the demands go from one party to another party, and then they are added to what is called a Class A action, which are collective demands, which are trendy because they are being done in different commercial orders. In this particular case, the lawsuits denounce violative and abusive practices in relation to the law or free competition. In the United States, it is commonly known as the U.S. antitrust law. It is essentially aimed at preventing monopolistic practices by real estate brokers and brokerage firms, which artificially inflate prices for both sellers and buyers in the real estate market. We will put your name in English as sellers and buyers because this is the American market. We will talk about the listing broker, the broker who is in charge, or the agent who is in charge of putting the 20 and who takes the unit to market it directly from the seller. And we're going to find the buyer broker who's been accompanying the buyer. So in this case, the damages they are requesting in these lawsuits are already reaching over $100 billion, even $200 billion. They're talking about a demand that's going to reach $300 billion. I have here in this presentation, I always like to put in blue and underline the source where you put the news and you click and the source appears. This is the Bloomberg News on a class action lawsuit for over 100 trillion. The cases are now in courts in Massachusetts, Illinois, Missouri, South Carolina, Kansas City, misspelled, corrected, New York, Texas, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Florida, California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Washington, D.C. And well, of course, it will keep running. These are the main states where there is a higher transaction. I'm going to run the names of the cities and I'll pass this presentation so that everyone has it. In this case, also here, they always have the link. They click on it and they will have the link to the news where all these demands are listed. Well, what does the National Writers Association say? Mantil Williams, who is the VP of Communications, has written and made a statement. According to them, the practice of the listing broker paying compensation or cooperating with the buyer broker saves time and money for the sellers, the vendors, by having many buyer brokers, that is, many offers from buyers, participating in that local market, and therefore creates a larger group of buyers for the sellers. That is, there is a greater alternative of buyers which brings benefit to the seller because they have several offers. For purchasers, these markets save them the burden of extra expenses they should assume at the time of finalizing the transaction. They enable them to receive professional representation and make it possible for home ownership to be within reach for a greater number of individuals. For these reasons, the NWA continues to fight for consumer protection. That has basically been the gist. To argue that that brings benefits to both parties and both parties can have savings or better alternatives. That has been the main line of the National Association of Writers, which is, of course, sometimes involved tangentially, sometimes indirectly, and sometimes directly in the sum of all these multiple demands that have different law firms in different states. In 2023, of course, the relevant event occurs where the demands start to become collective. They add up thousands of other people who supposedly have been affected by the same practices. They even relied on the fact that there was one of these lawsuits that got a serum or an agreement, and an agreement 1.8. In my perspective, that agreement has only served to intensify the other lawsuits and cause them to increase in number. The proposal, which also involves the United States Department of Justice, is one called NOSALEC, which I'm leaving here, translated into Spanish. Simply click on this link and you'll have this complete demand translated into Spanish in the link. It was February 15th, just a few weeks ago, in 2024, that this lawsuit had finally reached, after 3 attempts, an agreement between the parties. They had agreed, look, we're going to put so much money and this money is used in this way, and a fund will be sold for all the other people. So when the judge is about to sentence and the agreement is already in place, then it transpires that the Department of Justice steps in, the professor of demand comes in, and files a document stating that this should not be accepted under any circumstances. The filing is crucial as it marks the DOJ's opinion in lawsuits, classes, and actions, or collective lawsuits filed by the Department of Justice. What the Department of Justice thinks and how they reason, it makes you infer where things are heading. Actually, whoever has this behind them, that's why I mentioned the Wall Street issue. When I talk about Wall Street, I'm talking about the big funds that have investments right now, not only in houses, but also in certain firms that could try to replace what would be the buyer brokers. Obviously, who do the commissions affect? Theoretically, if someone is affected, it would be that the seller stops receiving money and the buyer buys at a higher price. Those would be the only arguments they could argue. Now, if it is Wall Street firms that are selling, a decrease of 3 percentage points has a tremendous impact on the numbers of these massive transactions carried out by these firms in the Wall Street market. However, if these individuals are also shareholders in companies such as Redfin or Zillow, which also have the inclination to provide practically all of the retail market deals, thus allowing the buyer to go straight to make a purchase from the listing. And I think that's the deal, the way they're developing it. And this is the benefit of understanding what is debated because you know what's behind it. What is the specific and summarized content of this intervention proposal by the Department of Justice in relation to this litigation? Please provide a concise overview. No Way, known as Nazareth because he's one of the plaintiffs, says the agreement doesn't fix the flaws and thinks it's not fair, reasonable, or appropriate. In other words, in order to reach an agreement in a lawsuit and action, the judge must be considered fair, reasonable, and appropriate. The DOJ states that it is unfair, unreasonable, and inadequate. The suggested modifications fail to establish competition or decrease commissions. The agreement continues to grant the seller and the listing broker, the broker who sells with the seller, the role to determine the compensation of the buyer broker, the role that regulates how much commission you will cooperate with the one who brings the buyer. It indicates that the steering will continue to exist. Steering in practice basically means a way of doing things that affects the market and means that in practice, listing brokers, that is, those who are selling, offer high compensations to prevent buyer brokers from diverting buyers or real estate buyers from houses that have a lower commission. In other words, when I take a client, I don't take them where they offer lower commission, I take them where they offer higher. Evidently, that is a practice that also possesses a fancy name. It is commonly referred to as steering. And why do they see it as a bad thing? Because, well, that results in inflated commissions, reducing the net income from the seller's own sales, and even increasing the price paid by the buyer. What they are trying to present in this anti-monopoly law is a conflict of interests where someone who represents someone who is theoretically buying should seek the best conditions to buy. But if you pay him with a commission based on the value, when the best conditions are to lower the price, the commission also decreases and vice versa. So this can be interpreted as a conflict of interest in the sense that I am going to experience happiness when the price increases in value. Basically, this is not always the case. Of course, there are some codes of ethics, but basically they say that the norm doesn't provide the alignment to achieve the best results. It also suggests, and here this is a fundamental part because it is the first time it suggests it, says the Department of Justice, a precautionary measure by the judge. I mean, the judge resolves this matter with a precautionary measure that prohibits sellers and listing brokers from making commission offers to brokers. In other words, it prohibits the distribution of commissions. What the Department of Justice is asking is, you can issue a restraining order that in the United States prohibits a listing broker or a seller from paying a buyer broker. And that's why we were saying that this kind of transactions or management can change the real estate landscape as we know it. This is a specific proposal from the Department of Justice in response to a class action lawsuit. It is proposed to prohibit the payment of commissions to the buyer broker unless the buyer broker pays it directly to the buyer. That is the specific proposal that is being put forward. DOJ indicates despite housing transactions being most expensive in Americans' lives, with internet and search portals like Zillow and Redfin, commissions have barely changed in spite of arrival of the internet. Check it out. They're talking about these two websites. On February 15th, which is the same date, he says, of course, among the other things he continues, is that they have suggestions that the services or commissions of buyer broker are free. That's incorrect. In other words, when the buyer broker is introduced, they usually say brokers present themselves to clients and tell them, you won't pay me for finding properties. The seller covers the cost. My services for you are provided free of charge. The seller pays for that. And they claim that it is not accurate and is giving a false impression. And the reason why they make this claim is essentially because when you are making a payment, increasing the selling price, the buyer is ultimately paying for it either directly or indirectly at some point during the mortgage. So if he is paying for it, it is because the value of the property he is buying is increasing. They say that a fairer agreement is for the buyer to make a deal with the buyer broker where they can pay either on a schedule or a flat fee for their service and subject to the success of achieving such a price or another. And that is not at all linked to the fact that the seller or the listing broker are paying commissions, which is where the conflict of interest arises. The DOJ states the agreed compensation doesn't benefit affected parties. In this lawsuit, the compensation gets divided among lawyers, leaving no benefits for those impacted by the case. I believe they are the ones carrying out all these trials. Beyond the fact that they need clients to appear on the screen, but I feel like it's the lawyers who are carrying out these actions. The distribution of funds in the settlement indicates that it lacks significant benefits for the affected members. They receive a small portion of what they are demanding, while the class and action affected in the United States receive virtually nothing. It seems like the trend is here to stay with the listing brokers, where they also have these franchises and companies, and the buyer broker is directly managed by the market as it happens in the Australian market or the English market, which they use as an example. They say a precautionary measure that prohibits, it's an alternative that would better serve all the plaintiffs. Parties could agree on precautionary measure prohibiting compensation offers to buyer broker by participants in MLS. The sellers would be responsible for determining the commissions of the listing broker, while the buyers would be responsible for determining the compensation of the buyer broker in a representation contract. The thing is, Percentage-wise, apparently in England and Australia, Anglo-Saxon markets, where there is also common law, like the American market in terms of legal matters, and they also have their licensing schemes for real estate brokers, only about 5% of home sales occur with a buyer broker. I mean, the buyer buys directly 95% on the internet portals, and the listing broker does stay accompanying or marketing the properties that are being sold in the market and charges obviously lower commissions in the range of 3%, not the standard 6%, which in the United States is basically not a standard, but it can be 5, it can be 6, it can be 7. In the commercial part, it is left quite outside the standard regulations, but in the housing part, typically that is the range that is used. Well, the commission percentages at Buyer Broker have a minimal correlation with the ultimate selling price of the property. In other words, what the Buyer Broker is charging as a percentage seems to have nothing to do with the price of the house. And it is probable that potential buyers would prefer a fee structure that does not reward their broker for pushing for a higher price on the house they are interested in purchasing. Here's what we're reiterating: a small portion of the emphasis that the Department of Justice establishes is that when you're being compensated because the house is worth more and you charge more, it becomes very challenging for you to maintain an ethical position, to decrease the price while accurately representing the buyer. They are inviting you to go more to a buyer's representation than to a transactional broker who does not represent anyone, but rather you represent the buyer as a lawyer and you represent the seller. You perform these services and you provide these services, and the precise remuneration of the purchaser, which is unrelated to the commission received by the seller, DOJ is requesting that, and this lawsuit is expanding in various locations. What are the conclusions and their legacy? And with that, I finish to move on to what could be questions and comments. This lawsuit is in a phase where the Department of Justice is making this file, and now the plaintiffs are going to respond. I mean, this isn't in an early sentence, even though there have already been settlement sentences, but there has been a huge uproar of lawsuits everywhere, lawsuits of such magnitude that they can bankrupt the main brokerage firms. By the way, in some of them, AIXP is also present. For example, Linked, Keller Williams is also there. The main ones are also present in those locations. Everything that is the Relogy Group, which is Remax, Century 21, all the ones you know, including Sotevi, wherever. The conclusions that I see in general, and with this I finish, is probably one, the broker who has a license will have to suggest measures to protect themselves from the advancing lawsuits. In this case, the licensed broker from EXP is, of course, doing all the analysis to make recommendations to each of their agents or licensees. The most likely thing is that those who come on behalf of the buyer, if you are capturing many leads and carrying out offers to split commissions, have representation contracts of the buyers subscribed, clearly detailing and listing the services and identifying that the compensation figure is in accordance with that representation. What does this mean? In addition to a commission split that I agree with the seller, I should have a contract in which I document all the services I am performing on behalf of the buyer, and it should specify the amount that will be paid for these services, attempting to clarify that there is no conflict of interest regarding the fact that the funds originate from the seller. I imagine this is something that multiple brokers are doing, most likely your contact or the shorter one. Ask your broker what they suggest. What should we do? Number two, if you're mainly generating leads and acting as a buyer agent, meaning you're the one looking for potential buyers interested in the Florida market, the Panama market. Panama doesn't have any issues. This is an American market. And you're someone who's getting a lot of contacts from interested people. It's important that you reinforce the added value of your services as an agent, justifying excessively the charges they make for another job. This can be done with market reports, what we call comparative market analysis, the CMA, providing the client with a lot of information, explaining a bit about the contracts, about the process, once they are further along in the transactional phase. That's not just a sales management, it's a management that reinforces that you'll be getting paid for something you're carrying out. And well, it's always good to have ongoing training in different institutions to add value to your work, which is the one being objected to. The one being objected here is the buyer agent in the commission that is made in split. In other words, they want to prohibit the commission that the seller pays to the listing broker from being shared with the buyer broker or buyer agent. It's likely that multiple developers, particularly public companies listed on the stock market like Lennar, will aim to reduce or eliminate commissions for buyer brokers to avoid being entangled in these lawsuits. A few months ago, you may have noticed that Lennar, which was paying high commissions last year, suddenly, from 2021 onwards, has been experiencing corrections. And one wonders, why? Could it be that there are few listings and they have many clients? It could be due to that, but also due to that. Basically, these companies avoid lawsuits where they're told they paid what they shouldn't. And basically, they prefer then, and they will have the tendency to simply avoid the lawsuits of focusing on paying the listing broker, and they will then generate exclusive listing contracts for different units. So my opinion is that you should reach out to local developers to expand your network with them and get contracts listing, which is the one that will stay alive in any of the scenarios. Now 4, the National Reactor Association and the MLS system, as well as the top border firms, are getting their asses kicked in court with numbers that are off the charts in case they fail to win against the courts. The litigation seems to favor the role of the listing broker and uses as an example that in countries like Australia and England, more than 94% of homes are purchased directly with the seller. Either the buyer goes directly to the seller or goes to the listing broker directly without having representation from the buyer broker. Obtaining a listing in this upcoming period is essential. In other words, if you have been generating leads, that is fantastic, and you can utilize them to demonstrate to anyone who is planning to sell that you are a potentially valuable broker to have the listing due to your abundance of leads and your ability to generate a large number of leads. Rather than settling for and it doesn't have to involve a week-long change. We have to set aside 30 minutes probably per day or per week to go looking, because if it happens that this demand reaches a total serum in one of these huge failures, it will have to be, because otherwise they will generate bankruptcies in all institutions, including the National Association of Realtors, which they are evidently attacking because they want to dismantle it. The listings are the winners. If you enhance collaboration with global clients, if you essentially have these global clients, I also find it advantageous to explore some markets where these regulations have no influence and you can be taking the initiative to divide with whoever you desire, since American legislation does not have jurisdiction in that particular situation. And as I've been saying, listing or brokerage in Panama is perfectly allowed, and you can pay the commissions in the split without any regulation, at least for now. Of course, what usually happens in the United States sometimes tends to repeat itself down here, but here in Panama, I don't see a major problem because there are very few active listing brokers. So they are really interested in splitting commission with buyer brokers who also do a great job. And the platforms like the MLS are not as well integrated as we have in the United States. So basically, this is the conclusion. The thing is that Wall Street now owns this house and they're selling or planning to sell, because Wall Street's business is always about buying and selling, buying cheap, selling expensive, like all businesses of those who invest. And well, this pressure is directed towards lowering their costs by utilizing their own companies to try to get rid of half of what will be one of the costs, which are costs that, when seen on a large scale, are truly billions of dollars. That's all for today, and well, I'll be waiting for your questions. Let's go to the closing of the presentation. All right, let's get to the Q&A. Thanks. What is your opinion, Jesus? Do you believe that those lawsuits will be successful? Where will they put an end to the possibility? Because what they're asking is a restraining order. In short, they solely want a federal trial, obliging to the entire American system.
The primary issue at hand is the historical aspect. Once a state rules in favor of the plaintiff, they initiate the practice of using it as a precedent, just like a case with legal standing, and commence applying it as if they were copy-pasting it to all the other states in existence. And the reality is, we actually have one as well. This particular group of lawyers, who are the individuals that are receiving the lion's share of the transactions? Who are the ones that are taking the whole cake? Who are the individuals responsible for assembling the lawsuit? Because if we are discussing an antitrust matter, here the individuals who are receiving the majority portion of this cake are the legal professionals who are initiating the lawsuits.
Well, in the latest lawsuits, the ones talking about 100 billion and 200 billion, the whole point is that they need to have the big bucks to pay the people who have been affected. However, it is important to note that the antitrust law is a federal law. I mean, there are various laws and regulations that govern this area. As an illustration, the regulations in every state are distinct when it comes to obtaining a real estate license. The exams are distinct. The Department of Labor and the licensing authority are not identical. So someone who has a license in Florida doesn't have an approved license in all states. They have to take the exams and meet the requirements of some of the states. Some of them have to be residents there. Others don't necessarily have to be residents. But when it comes to antitrust, anti-competition, that's federal. That was a little bit of what just happened with Colorado and the ruling of the Supreme Court that if the state of Colorado or Maine or Illinois can remove the presidential candidate from the candidate list, the Supreme Court, with the 9 Republican judges and the liberal and conservative Democrats, said that the states cannot determine who will be the electoral candidate because that is something federal in this case. The move is going in that direction. The antitrust or anti-competition law is federal. Therefore, a state will not be able to say, hey, that cannot be applied here because I have my own regulation regarding real estate licenses. It will not say no. No, this is a matter of anti-competition. In this situation, any person named buyer broker is required to pay buyer, and the seller is not even allowed to pay the commission through their chosen listing broker. And if he does, he's subject to persecution. So, of course, like everything else, you would be putting yourself at risk of paying commissions by cooperating outside the law. That's why I mentioned that this has the potential to completely transform the landscape of real estate as we know it in the broker business.
Around here on YouTube, we have a comment that says how we do the brokers that we raise links, and usually our strength is not the listing.
Undoubtedly, that is precisely the crux we were actively discussing within the context of the broker business. Usually they used to say that one must search for a listing. Why? Because you feel calm and people come to buy from you. That's how you secure the commission. It was like a business in your context. You get the listing, you don't have to work much. The one who works is the one who has the leads. Fortunately, there is a group of people, among whom our friend S5 is included, who have a great strength in media marketing development to capture leads. And that has empowered them to achieve and generate a substantial amount of commission. That is also the situation for many others who have been developing that potential skill, which is extraordinary, without a doubt, because from a logical point of view, you say, well, who has more entitlement to charge a commission? Who's bringing you the buyer and putting the money in? Or the person who is selling it to you? I mean, the market has always favored the individual who brings the buyer. These people, when buying houses like Street, having 50 to 60% of all houses that will probably be for sale in the next few years, are basically preventing that from happening. What does a person with many leads do? Basically look for a listing. If you want to protect yourself, this crisis isn't going to blow up next week. You're going to keep doing business with your leads. What is my recommendation? Once and for all, allocate some of the hours of the week to obtain listings based on demonstrating that you generate a large number of leads, which implies that you inform someone, provide me with your house because I have 300 potential buyers on a weekly basis here in the Florida market. That is one recommendation. And another recommendation is to expand internationally. Currently, with remote work and Zoom and all the negotiations that can be done, there exist extremely uncomplicated methods to easily conduct business with specific products as well. Maybe they're not residential products for living, but they are for investment. That's why we're doing it. I ain't recommending what I ain't doing. I'm practicing what I'm preaching. I have products in Florida and I have products now in Panama. Basically, I'm internationalizing a management since both markets are in dollars. We're interested in the performances and we're seeing that sometimes one market behaves better while the other behaves better in something else. I mean, I consider that to be all about diversification. When we leave, we're running away from Venezuela. There are some who came to see what they were going to do, and there are others who took precautions in advance and left orderly with their immigration visas resolved, with their work resolved. We didn't make it in my particular case running to Florida. We didn't arrive with all the visas ready to go. I am discussing the development of 25 residence visas in our business group in the long run and how it has impacted us. However, we arrived by running to see how I save a TPS. I mean, when you do not take precautions, you have to run for your safety. And when 2008 came, it hit us too, because it doesn't mean we're not anticipating and all. We knew there was an issue coming in 2008, but we had no clue about the magnitude of the problem. No clue. We conducted an exhibition at the Mayacon, at the Miami Construction Expo, prior to the 2008 crisis that had the slogan, "Cash or Crash." We did a public seminar there in Mayacon where it said the market is going to crash unless you have a product that generates cash. And let me tell you, we messed up because there was a crash, even though the product was generating cash. All of the products encountered trouble. Clearly, in light of that type of experience, I was aware that a crash was imminent for products that did not provide a means of payment. And it occurred. That pulled the entire market, but that contaminated the entire market. And that is the reason why this time I am stating that there is a banking crash right in front with the problem of offices. And that's already in the past. It contaminates the whole process, the entire management of the loan fluid that the banking system has. To internationalize, you have the opportunity on the table. There are easy possibilities to do it, especially for those who have Spanish-speaking clients like us, because we have the whole market. And well, in addition to that, we are going to spend listing, because if this keeps evolving the way it is, and we receive a sentence that states they are unable to pay, well, the seller and the listing broker are going to say, and besides, I already have a precedent in England and Australia where that happens. Pay a broker doesn't pay.
And what is the call to action for those people? What are you saying in the listing? And you mentioned that there are options in Panama. What would be the call to action or options without the need to internationalize by going to Australia and the United Kingdom?
If we are in the following week, we're going to do a webinar that's basically the real estate report of Panama. Panama is a tiny country, really tiny compared to the United States, obviously. But you have the dollar and you have the 2.1% inflation. You have lowest interest rates in banks, what you have in the United States. There was no banking collapse when 2008 crisis came, and it is a highly competitive market. We are planning to conduct a webinar next week regarding the product in Panama. This is not the one. This does not solve the lives of everyone, but it does offer protection. When you have protection, it's like if it generates a crash here. In the group, the one who knows us, I like to be a little ahead of the market, and let me tell you, sometimes the wave passes over. We practically obtain residency visas for every individual, all family groups, and every single thing, either in Florida or in Panama. Everyone. When it comes to the issue of leaving, well, look, for instance, my mother, I will give you a very clear example. She says, I am not leaving Venezuela. Just so you know, I am not leaving. I tell you, it doesn't matter. You get temporary residency in Panama, which I can get for you as a retiree, and you can be here on vacation whenever you want. When you visit your son, you can relax. However, he developed a chronic kidney condition, and at one point in Venezuela, there was no alternative but to succumb to the illness within a matter of weeks. Therefore, we were compelled to depart abruptly in an urgent situation, in an emergency, because there was no supply for the renal issue. If she doesn't have the residency that I had, she couldn't be eligible to receive the supplies that were received in the Social Security of Panama, which were, of course, ordered because I had all my hospitals in order. In that, at least what we achieved was like everything, because life always ends at some point, but you extend in better conditions. I always say, and it's not like I am full of guarantees or full of parachutes because circumstances always come unexpectedly, but these waves that are easy to predict, these ones, I surf them. If these individuals join to eliminate commissions from buyer brokers, I promptly do the same for listings and for states where they're making payments. It's simple. You don't have to be a genius for that kind of stuff.
But even with the analogy of the waves, if it goes over you, damn, and it didn't happen too far away, damn, it quickly resurfaces. If you stay at the bottom 15 meters down, it'll be harder to reach up and stick your head out for air.
If nobody wants a crisis, and I'm also the one who knows me, I'm metaphysical. So they say that where you put your attention and your feelings, that attracts. No, I ain't paying no mind to the crisis growing. I'm focusing on making more money, even if another event happens to come up. What I do not become is an ostrich that inserts its head under the ground and claims nothing happens in any way. Because I was like that back in the year 2007. They used to tell me, look, a crisis came, they're not getting credits in Brickell Avenue. It will be Frege related and Fortune, however, not us. We have a solid product in our possession. Also, we asked for a 30% down payment. Nobody here was asking for 30. Everyone was asking for 5 and 10. And me, Donald Trump, we had $400 million in execution projects. Nah, I wasn't listening to anyone. Look, but we didn't get it. Man, that's the kind of people who can't make it. I'm getting more than enough. And then I got my dose of humility from getting dragged by the wave, getting like 70 tumbles. And obviously, I stepped up. I discovered that everything is impacted when something is impacted. And what I said, let's lower our profile, let's lower our humility, and from there we'll attend and share the things that are happening. In Brickell, where there was the highest amount of buyer deposit loss, it was Brickell. In the Juve project, no. In the Viceroy of Related and in Fortune itself, 40% of the apartments were in foreclosure after having paid the down payment practically in the following months. I mean, I'm telling you that this crisis, there's always a crisis. If you check market cycles, they go up and down, up and down, up and down. What we haven't realized is that we're like ants building an anthill and thinking the rain won't come. So what you have to say is, I enjoy the water and I enjoy the sun, I enjoy the winter and I enjoy the summer.
Now that you mention it, yesterday in one of the presentations, I was asked several questions. I had 2 presentations, and in 2 presentations, they asked me the question, but then you say that the Panamanian market is better than the American one, and no way, hold on, let's take a break. Not a matter of competition or that this is better than that. They are alternative markets. They complement each other, and you have to understand that crises are and will continue to be. You have to ride it out. So we're not saying, and I'm not saying that the Panamanian market is a better market than the American one.
The market in the United States has a substantial demand and is significantly larger in size compared to the market in Panama. Now, if you grab the right question, can I earn more dollars in return on an investment in Panama than in the United States? The response is affirmative, with the magnitude of the Tron Tower. Affirmative, because investments are analogous to mathematics. Investing small, earning high returns with low costs leads to better performance. So where do you do it? That's what needs to be reviewed for the investor who's looking for a vacation. We develop a product. If our product isn't meant for you to move in the first place, you could move, but that's not what it's designed for. Designed for high performance in dollars and vacations in the best places worldwide. And for that, we invite you next week so as not to extend beyond that.
If I don't want to wait, then next week can be like water.
Panamain.com to initiate contact, facilitate the naming process. I would seize a suitable name and proceed inside. The other one is Miami X. Here we'll be watching, as always, the American market, just like we do. We're there, we suffer it, and we enjoy it.
That's how it is. Around here, Sylvia Godoya on YouTube says it's the listing agent's job to find the buyers.
Yes, the listing agent, basically what happens is that he's, as I say, Wall Street. Wall Street has Zillow and has Redfin. In the case of England, in the case of Australia, that is what occurs. Buyers, 95% of them proceed directly to the listings based on these search tools. What the Department of Justice is saying is the only reason why that happens to us in the United States is because brokers tell clients, you don't pay the commission, it's free. And they say that's deceptive because you're actually paying for it with an increase. And well, that's an argument I don't agree with. Let me tell you, I'm one of the affected ones. It's just that I've learned in life that I'm not going to fight with the rain or with the snow or with the sun, but simply put on sunscreen when it's time to tan, rain when it's time to breathe in ions and electrons. And well, we have to see, because life, if it's not life, it's either suffering or enjoyment. So in this case, there's a circumstance that's leading us to move in another direction. If it's inconvenient for you to have a listing, allocate time to create a networking event with developers, regional devs, and local devs. Why do you believe Lennar, a publicly traded company, decreased the commission from 6% to 1% in the previous year? Almost zero. Why? No, but it's probably because they have a lot of clients. Yeah, it could be that the litigation is low, but the reason is that public companies prepare for this so they don't get involved in litigation. And they finally start implementing the protocols. So this simply looks for is move ahead, have them give you a tip in the bag before this Bitcoin happens. Well, it is at 65. Has anyone not been explaining and saying that the halving is going to affect the exchange traded funds? That was all over the place. So who did it catch off guard? No, but that's not going to occur. ETFs happen or not. See, but markets falling. Actually, I use a compass, and here I can tell you, though it embarrasses me, that's all Jamie Dane from JP Morgan Chase says. I take it the other way. Why? Because definitely when he said Bitcoin is a scam, I'm going to vote for everyone from the bank. What I'm saying is certified data. I was buying Bitcoin, but from a company I had in Europe. So a person who says one thing and does another, this one says the bank is super solid. I've never been better. JP Morgan is practically selling all of its shares. JP Morgan after 25 years. Sir, every time this individual speaks, I promptly perceive the contrary because circumstances do not appear to be as they were in the past when words aligned with actions. So that makes it more fun. Simply getting a listing is not complicated, and if you have these leads, it's even less complicated. In any case, it requires some work and information, but you'll be able to develop that right now. In the meantime, enjoy the leads, make the most of them, and fulfill their international potential wherever possible. It won't cost you anything to have it. That's my recommendation. Many blessings, Adel. Great job.
We possess a substantial amount of data, and we must maintain a record of the events that have transpired regarding the legal cases against Einar, while also monitoring the American financial problem. Well, the deadline for the BTFP is on the 11th day of November or the 11th day of November, as specified in the requirements. What was the financing program about?
The Fed to the banking sector, the liquidity window, $180 billion lent to the banks that will not be renewed if they are not solvent by the 11th next week.
So that is why Jerome Powell was stating that there are certain large banks that are going to consume certain small banks. You have to come to the monitoring center.
We have all these recorded webinars, so you can see for yourselves if we're making it up. We can check the webinars that we have online if it wasn't said what was going to happen, because part of what was talked about in January 2023 happened in 2023. I was in the PwC report, and we talked this year about what is going to happen according to the report by PricewaterhouseCoopers. In other words, we're not claiming to be geniuses. We've had experiences that have knocked us down, but we're extracting information from what is considered the most reliable data and working to simplify it for you, because we're translating a lawsuit from Spanish and summarizing the key points. Men say no competition. Men say competition not based on this. Men say won't allow higher payments. Suggest judge take action. You already know in a nutshell what this is about.
And as we've been saying on social media, information is power. And in this case, the information we're bringing is that this power means money coming in or going out. So thanks to everyone for their participation, to those who were on YouTube, on LinkedIn, here on Zoom, Adel, Maria Elena Desir, and to those who were on the different channels.
Greetings. Next week, we will have Marie as a moderator, along with Jesus, and I will have less participation, but we will be as they present us the updated report on Panama 2024. Good day.